In today's video, we're going to talk about wrap super funds. It's a structure that sits in between the traditional super fund, which pretty much everyone is exposed to when you first start a job. But by default, your employer would put you into a traditional super fund like a retail super fund or a industry super fund, but it's in a master trust structure. Now, the other structure that is available to most is what's called a self-managed super fund. We're not going to talk about that today, but it is what we often see people jump from a regular super fund, a master trust, into a self-managed super fund. The structure that sits in the middle of these two is what we refer to as a wrap super fund, and it offers a whole world of investment options. And today we're going to go really in depth into that structure for you to understand how this can benefit your super long term. Now, if you get some good advice, this structure does enable you to get some great tax strategies inside your super. Make sure your investments are in line with what you're trying to do, because there's so many options compared to the 4 or 5 options that you would most likely have in an industry super fund. So you can really tailor the investment portfolio to suit you and what you're trying to achieve long term. The other side of it is the fact that everything that you're entitled to gets paid directly to your super. There is no middleman. So it's very transparent. It gives you all the control in the world and allows you to really understand what's happening underneath the bonnet of your super. Again, if you're someone that's got a bit of super built up and you've got a job and you've been working for a little while, this video could be absolutely crucial, not only for why you're accumulating, but for your retirement years as well. To make it easy to follow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and you guys can sort of follow what I'm writing down. Wrap super funds. So wrap super funds. We'll put them over here. You got your provider at the top. Big company, big super company, APRA regulated, and looking after the administrative side of your super, making sure it's running well, doing what it needs to do. And on the other side, they give you an investment options menu, the provider. The provider's got no influence on sort of your returns. All they do is give you that administrative provisions and looking after your super, basically. So when it comes to, who's your provider, who cares? It's irrelevant. As long as they're not charging you too much admin and the investment options that fits within your goals. Each provider might offer a little bit more, a little bit less, and the costs would vary based on that pretty much. But having said that, most wrap providers are pretty much on par in terms of cost. Nothing too dramatic in terms of differences there. Now, these boxes that I'm putting down, all of these are different fund managers. So an actual company fund manager. So different fund managers. So, and pretty big players, whether it's Australian or international, and it's all down to how you want things invested. So if you're a growth-based investor, you'll have a bit more growth fund managers. And within each of these fund managers, you've got, say, 2 or 3 different key individual investors. So if one of them doesn't do well, or say 2 of them doesn't do well, the other, say, 5 or 6 do well, all your eggs are not in the same basket. In a traditional setting, in a master trust super, which is again where everyone is, I don't know what I'm doing with my handwriting here, where everyone pretty much sits within. You got, if your investments are within a fund, then there's probably 2 or 3 key individual investors, and that's it. If they don't do well, say in their specific balance fund or their growth fund, that's it. The whole thing goes pretty bad, and all your eggs are in the one basket. Versus over here, like I said, you might have 6 or 7 that do quite well, 1 or 2 may not do so well throughout the 12 months. You get access to all sorts of different fund managers. You can also get access to sort of shares, direct equity, if that's what you want to do, Australian shares. Some providers offer you direct equity in also international space. So you can go in the route of, say, Silicon Valley businesses, whether it's Facebook, Amazon, Apple, big players like that. Usually you can put up to 10% of your balance within those companies, which is pretty exciting for some people to think that they can get access to such influential companies within their super. Over here, you don't get access to that. You do get access to it in terms of a fund manager style, so a little bit of your, say, growth portfolio is sitting in the international space, but you don't actually have ownership of shares. Another investment options you get access to is the SMA world, separately managed account, where a fund manager still looks after everything, but you get ownership of the shares. And this is a really important asset class. You don't get access to it over here, where you have, say, 20 shares within this portfolio, and you get all the benefits. You don't get impacted by the capital gains tax either of people entering and leaving your super fund. It's all sort of its own entity within your super, which is great. On top of that, when you're looking at your portfolio, you can see exactly what's going on in this wrap space. Whether it's growth, income, you can see how much growth you've had, how much income you've had throughout the year. It's all broken down. So 1 year you might have, say, 6% of income and 4% of growth. So all up, you've got a 10% return. You can get a good feel of that. Or the following year, the market might have been a bit wobbly and you had a negative 4% return, but a 6% income. So you still ended up in a pretty good space of 2% of a return, if that makes sense. So all of that is broken down, transparent. You can see exactly what's going on. So, some people like the idea of income. So you get access to so many investment options. You can focus on just players that are interested in income. And income is referring to, say, your shares. You are looking at the dividend side versus the growth side. That's the income portion. It's those businesses basically rewarding stakeholders for investing in their businesses in the first place, and they reward you by sharing some of their profits in the way of dividends. And most businesses, regardless of what the markets are up to, unless it's too shaky, tend to pay good income if those businesses have been around for a little while, and that's what they're doing in terms of a strategy. So they're rewarding their stakeholders. You probably find them more fresh to business. They might hold on to some more of their funds, so you don't see much over here because they're on that sort of growth trajectory and they want to just sort of blossom in the first part of their business growth. So, but all that is broken down versus over here. So if you're in a balanced fund or a growth fund, well, what does that actually mean? How much of it is income focus? How much is growth focus? Do you have the capability to say, well, I liked a bit more income? For retirees, it's quite important because they might just love the idea of 6% of income or 5% income, not too much exposure to the growth side because that's a bit more volatile. So all of that is catered to what you're trying to do because you've got so many options versus a 4 or 5 generic options within that. Now, you got your providers, as I said, you got your investment options with all the different fund managers, but at the core of it, you got a centralized cash account. All your dividends are paid directly into this account. Tax benefits, vital tax benefits in the way of franking credits that you should be entitled to are paid to your account. Now, looking at this franking credit side, it's basically it's a tax offset. Now, to explain it for you, let's just say as an example, an Australian share like ANZ, chances are within this space you got, as an example, ANZ within that balanced portion of your portfolio. And if you've got a balanced fund and ANZ is getting some of that money paid into their business because of your super, well, they'll have to reward you by sharing some of their profits. And they reward you by paying that to your super in the way of income. Now, what ANZ should do prior to doing that is pay some company tax, and that is 30%. Now, if they pay 30% and then they pay your super in the way of income and you get taxed again at 15%, what was happening before is there's this sort of double taxation because they've actually used your funds partially to generate those incomes. Now, generate that income. So what the Keating government did in the 80s, they said, well, we don't want that double taxation to go on. So some shares will come with a franking portion, which then offsets this tax. Now, some businesses are fully franked, some are partially franked, unfranked, and it goes down to who's paid that 30% tax. So if you pay the 30% tax in full, then it's basically fully franked and you get a nice 30% tax offset. Now over here, because you've got so many options, one of these fund managers may be, as an objective, trying to lower your tax bill by going after specific companies within their portfolio that pay 30% tax, have paid their 30% tax and are fully franked. They're generating income. Versus over here again, we just don't know. We don't know what they're up to. Are they fully franked? So just because you've got Australian shares over here, it doesn't hold the same amount of weight necessarily. It's not apples for apples compared to the Australian shares that you can get access to over here, because they've got some objectives behind it. And that would then feed into lowering your tax bill as potentially a strategies for retirees. And if you're as a strategy for people in accumulation, and if you're retired already, all those tax offsets would just work into a credit from the ATO, because there's no tax to be offset, so it pays your cash account directly. So a lot that you can do. And a reminder in terms of tax, when you pay, when your provider pays into your super, you get taxed at 15%, and you get taxed at 15%, and on your returns, let's just say you got $100,000 in super, you get a 10% return. That's $10,000. On that, the tax is also 15%, give or take. Obviously there's calculations involved, but point of taxation there, point of taxation here. So that's what I'm referring to when I talk about the tax strategies. You can do a lot, and that's annual. So if you think about it, the more tax you can hold on to, because you've got strategies in place, your super fund is potentially the objective is to get that income, get that franking credit, and lower this tax bill. You can see the whopping difference you can make, because we're talking thousands of dollars, and the higher your balance, the more tax you pay. Obviously, the more contributions also, the more you pay. Right now, the contribution for before tax is $30,000, so you pay 15% before any of that actually hits your super fund. So only 85% ever goes in. Same thing with your employer. If they're putting money into your super, the most that ever goes into your super is 85%. The 15% goes to the ATO. So if you can do some strategies to hold on to more, to hold on more funds, it can make a pretty significant difference down the line, and because of the fact that those money would be sitting in the cash account and then getting back and reinvesting in your account, getting a return. It's not just $1,000 saved, $1,000 long term. It's $1,000 saved, sitting in your super, getting returns, and the snowball effect is quite significant. So you got a lot more options within this wrap facility to do some income work, strategies in terms of growth, tax, ensure that your super fund is not only growing, but growing on the back of strategies that suit what you're trying to do. They're probably like really important factors to know in terms of your super, because if you think about what are the real big opportunities, well, these days, like fees, if you're moving around fund from another fund, fees are pretty much on par. If you want returns, well, 4 or 5 options, like I said, with most people. And there's a bit of overlap, so you might get a percentage here or there, but the thousands of dollars that we're talking about here in terms of tax that you're paying annually, if you can hold on to that, because you're entitled to it, you should be getting these funds and they should be working for you, your super and your retirement. Instead, you can't actually, in this scenario, understand what's going on with them, because all of that is paid indirectly into your units within your super, versus over in this structure, it's unbundled and everything is paid into the centralized cash account, which we just spoke about. So all inside of this cash account, and you can see what's happening. And this is just, the name comes from the fact that it's a wraparound structure. And so this is all to do with your super, nothing to do with outside of super. That's where most people sort of get a bit confused when I talk about this. This is just all happening within your super. So what is your story outside of super? We're not talking about that. So if you're thinking, well, I don't actually know what is happening with my tax. I don't know what my philosophy is for my investments. I don't know whether I'm doing what all I can be doing for my super. Is there thousands of dollars going out the door getting donated to the ATO? They're the questions that should be raised. Most people sort of, all they do is they go, well, currently I'm sitting in this provider. This new provider's come around, they look pretty good, but ultimately they're still sitting in their master trust traditional fund with their 4 or 5 investment options. And make it even worse, the fees are pretty much on par these days. It's not like 10 years ago where fees were quite different from, say, retail fund to industry fund. They're all pretty much on the same playing field because they don't want to be left behind. You know, if you're going to charge too much these days, you're going to be left behind. No one's going to stick around. People have access to information. It's pretty readily available. It's not like 15, 20 years ago where people just thought, oh yeah, sounds good. We'll stick to that fund to then later on find out that we're getting absolutely slaughtered with fees. So yeah, so these are quite important. Again, you can expand on your investments as time goes on. But in terms of us, what we do, we would build your portfolio from start to finish, look into who you have in place, and have good conversation with you and provide you financial advice when it comes to your super. For most Australians, if they want to get advice when it comes to super, they do elect to use their super to pay for the fees. So you can definitely do that and save yourself from having to pay out of pocket. I'm sure your funds can be paid elsewhere at the moment. Most people prefer to get advice, but also not have to pay out of pocket. So if this has sort of raised your curiosity, you're thinking, well, this is all interesting. I've never heard about this before. There is a link at the bottom. Lock in a free 30-minute video strategy session. One of our advisors will have a good chat with you. And at the end of the 30 minutes, you can decide whether this is the right solution for you, which structure is best for you, and whether this would be the right solution for your retirement goals. Thank you for watching.